Hi, I'm Dr. Pam Cascione. I'm a professor of geropsychiatric nursing at the University of Pennsylvania and the Ralston House Term Chair in Gerontological Nursing. I'm also a nurse scientist at Penn Presbyterian. I'm a fellow in the American Academy of Nursing as well as the Gerontological Society of America. And I'm delighted to be here today to share with you my interprofessional program of research in robotics. The first study I'd like to share with you today is a study on a low-cost mobile robot to assist older adults with activities of daily living. To determine what the robot should do, we actually did qualitative interviews with older adults, clinicians, and paid caregivers at a Living Independently for Elders program, which is a program for all-inclusive care for older adults. I'm very excited to share with you that we were able to determine that the robot needed to encourage ambulation, hydration, as well as a reach task. And so this was a lot of fun. We piloted the robot with the older adults at the LIFE program, where it encouraged them to walk and to drink water. The robot is a relay robot, which is commercially available. It has a little bin that opens up where we store the water. And I can remember one of the older adults said, next time have it on ice, and didn't want it to be any strong water. So it was very fun how they interacted with the robot. They actually talked back and forth with the robot. We learned from this particular study that older adults like to have robots call them by name and be introduced to them, and then they actually have a normal conversation. And you'll see in one of the videos that I've shared in my PowerPoints that one of the engineers actually cut off the conversation that one of the older adults was having with the robot, which is we weren't expecting them to continue with that conversation. So one of the interesting things that we learned from this pilot study is that we really couldn't do this in a home-like setting initially because the older adults weren't always responding to the robot in their natural setting. So in their apartment building, the robot would come up and make a loud noise like knocking on the door, and they would come out and be encouraged to walk up and down the hallway, and it would follow the robot, which was autonomously driven because it knew the environment. It had been trained on the environment. But the pace of the older adults sometimes was slower than the robot, and the robot started spinning and would startle the older adults. And so we didn't really want to have that. And the other thing that we identified with this particular study is once they got home from the LIFE program, they were tired and they didn't want to participate with the robot. So we brought the robot back to the LIFE program where they were there during the day. And that we got tremendous engagement with the older adults at the site, and we learned a lot based on that. So that was really particularly helpful. And so then our third task that we identified that from the focus groups was that the older adults needed assistance with reaching something up high and reaching something on the floor to prevent them from falling, basically. And I'm really proud of this intervention that we did with the robotic arm because I came up with it. So one of the things we learned with the older adults about participating in research is that they want the research to be fun, but they also wanted it to be competitive. And we really hadn't thought about older adults wanting to compete with each other. And so we came up with a cornhole game that they would play against each other, the beanbag toss game that they would play against each other. And the robot would reach for the beanbags out of the cabinet up high and hand them to the older adults. After they had played the beanbag toss game or the cornhole game, the robot would retrieve the beanbags and hand them back. So the robot was reaching up in the cabinets and off the floor and handing them to older adults. Now this was only a 1 degree of freedom robotic arm, so it would swing back and forth like this and up and down, and that's about the movement that it had. And so some of the older adults weren't quite excited about this and really weren't that confident in the robotic arm. So you'll see some of the pictures that I have that show one of the women actually shying away from the robotic arm. So that was really helpful information for us to get. And so we would also then get interviews from the older adults after they had participated in this cornhole game, but also more about what they liked about the robot and what they didn't like. So that was really helpful feedback. Our second NSF-funded study was on the Quarry robot, which I mentioned. And this Quarry robot was developed here at Penn. And the PIs on that study were Mark Yim and myself. And we were testing the acceptability of a more humanoid robot that would assist with care planning at the LIFE program. What I mean by care planning is it would assist, it would recognize, it had facial recognition, it would identify an older adult and bring it to the different activities it needed to go to throughout the day at the LIFE program. So if it needed to see the dentist, it would identify, find the older adult and bring it to the dentist, walk with it or walk by its side if it wheeled by wheelchair, to the clinic to see the dentist, if it needed to see the podiatrist, or if it had a particular favorite activity that it wanted to go to, it would make sure that it went to that. And we were very excited about this opportunity with the facial recognition, but we also identified that our patient population was African American, and facial recognition at this point was not that good with African Americans, so we developed a backup system with an RFID tag to identify the older adult. The other issue we had with the facial recognition was a concern about the backlighting that we had in the LIFE program, because there were a lot of windows, and so it might have interfered with the robot's ability to identify individuals. So we had that backup RFID system to identify them as well. And the interesting thing, we were all set to go with this, and then a natural disaster hit, which many of you have heard of. It's called COVID-19. And Corey at the time was on display at the Philadelphia Art Museum, and Corey was locked up in the Philadelphia Art Museum for a total of 6 months that we did not have access to Corey for the research. So this was really a distressing time for all of us, but it particularly decimated that study. So we had to pivot and try and come up with something else once we did have access to the robot. What I came up with was it would become a COVID screener. So very few participants were coming into the LIFE program because of the COVID virus. So we were only able to screen about 20 older adults with this, and staff as well, as a COVID screener. And you'll see the setup. We'll see a picture of Corey at the Art Museum and Corey set up as a COVID screener in the slide. So it was a very good pivot because it was well received. And even when we're not having COVID on a regular basis, we used to, in these congregate settings, we have to do flu screening, cold screening during different seasons. So this is a good use of the particular study. It would take your temperature and it would ask you the COVID questions. And if you screen positive for COVID, you would need to go see your provider and then be sent home from the setting if you screen positive with the robot. Now, this next study that I'd like to share with you is a STTR study from the NICHD that is testing a haptic robot to improve stroke outcomes in patients who've had upper extremity weakness related to a stroke. So this was developed by Michelle Johnson, and the company is Recupero. And I am fortunate enough to be the clinical PI on this study, where we are going to deploy this haptic robot, which engages older adults in different upper extremity movements, back and forth, up and around, and actually playing video games. And they can play video games for themselves, but we also will have a setup of 3 haptic robots where they can play against each other, and also we have the opportunity to have one player influence the movement of another player as well. So what we found with the initial prototype testing is that patients gain confidence after using this robot only once, and we're going to have an opportunity to have them use this robot for an hour over 6 weeks, twice a week. And we're going to compare the use of this haptic robot either individually or as against another player or another 2 players against an hour of occupational therapy twice a week at the LIFE program again. So one of the nice things about the Living Independently for Elders program is they bring in up to 250 older adults a day, and these older adults are used to participating in research because this LIFE program's been affiliated with the University of Pennsylvania for over 20 years. So we've done research at this setting pretty consistently. This robot really has an opportunity to improve function in upper extremity of patients with chronic stroke. So these are people that will be enrolled that have had a stroke 3 months prior or longer. So this has been a very exciting study. I'm really looking forward to the results of this study, and we will report back in the next video. So this last study that I'd like to share with you is one that I'm very excited about. It's the use of a Paro robot in acute care setting to decrease agitation in persons with dementia and/or delirium. So the Paro robot is a robot developed out of Japan. It's a robotic seal that has artificial intelligence, so it responds to its name, it responds to how you interact with it. And to be honest with you, I thought it was the most ridiculous thing I'd ever seen when I first saw it. And then I went to a conference and I actually held the robot and I'm like, oh, I get it now. It's like, wow, this really is a different experience when you actually pick it up. And so we have deployed this robot on our acute care for elders unit at Penn Presbyterian with 52 older adults with dementia and/or delirium, and had an attention control arm of older adults who don't receive the robot, just have a research assistant with them for an hour. The older adults get an hour with this robot, with it sitting on their lap and interacting with it. Some interactions are more positive than others. There have been some that have just been incredibly joyful. One son was witnessing this with his father and said, "Is he talking about his job? I haven't heard him talk about his work for over 7 years. Can I videotape this?" So that's one of the findings with this study, is it actually increases verbalizations of older adults with cognitive impairment. The developer of this robot has gone to taking the robot to distressed areas. He's brought the robot to Poland for Ukrainian refugees there to help with PTSD in children and adults. He's also brought it to Turkey after the earthquake there to assist with PTSD, and he's bringing it to veterans populations who have PTSD as well. What we have found in our study is that in that first 20 minutes, we have dramatically decreased the agitation that the older adults are displaying, and they fully engage with the robot. We've also found in our study that it decreases pain in that first hour by distraction. And so it was a very productive research study. The nurses really want to be able to deploy it on the unit regularly whenever they need it. Now we are just working out the cleaning protocol. I worked with other nurses who have used this Paro robot in the acute care setting, and we have an evidence-based protocol for cleaning the robot. It has silver ionic fur, so it's a plush robot. You'll see in the pictures, it's quite delightful and engaging, and I had to build a UV light box to facilitate the cleaning because I was tired of wanding it with a UV wand. It took way too long, and the UV light box has really been a godsend in cleaning that robot. So if we can then deploy it on the unit and the nurses can use it on a regular basis as needed, it will be very productive in decreasing agitation and hopefully decreasing the use of medications and restraints in older adults with dementia and/or delirium. I'm looking forward to continued work in robotics in older adults. The older adults initially would tell me that, I'd love, my grandkids would love that, but I have to tell you, older adults love interacting with robots. So I'm looking forward to more studies in the future, and if you're interested in learning more, look into the Penn AI Tech website.